Hey guys, so today we're going to talk about some linear equations. So our central question is, how can you recognize a linear equation and how can you graph it? So make sure you write down your central question and you get your notebook set up. And then I actually have some definitions for you written down. So once you get that written, you can start writing these definitions. A linear equation is an equation whose graph is a straight line and the points on the line are solutions of the equation. So I'm just going to put a square around the two vocab words. So it's important to know that a linear equation is an equation whose graph is a straight line. And it's also important to know that the points on the line are solutions of the equation. And another thing for solutions, or another word for it, is basically saying the ordered pair, meaning the x and the y that lay on the line. Okay? So make sure you guys got that. If you need to pause it so they can move on. And then we're going to start our next section on graphing a linear equation. Okay, so now we're going to talk about graphing a linear equation. So I'm going to give you an equation and then we're going to go through the steps of how to solve this. So I'm going to say graph y equals negative 2x plus 1. Okay, so that's our equation. That's what we're going to have to graph. So the first thing I want you to do is make a table. So step 1, make a table. Okay, so I'm going to draw my table. X, Y. Okay, step 2 is going to be plug in X values into your table, okay? And remember, for your X values, you can pick anything that lays on the coordinate plane. So for me, I normally just pick pretty easy ones. So this time we're going to go negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, and 2. Okay? So I plug in the X values. The next step is going to be solve. So what that means is we're actually going to plug in those X's into that equation. Okay? So what you might want to do is you might want to write it over on the side so that you know what you're doing. So each of these are going to be multiplied by negative 2, because that's what it says. Negative 2 times x. So wherever I see the x, I'm going to substitute in that number. Okay? And then I finish writing my equation, because each equation is y equals negative 2x plus 1. Okay, so this is just a way to help you out, just in case you're having a hard time, you can't figure out how to do the table. Okay, so you have negative 2 times negative 2, which is positive 4, plus 1 is 5. Negative 2 times negative 1, which is 2, plus 1 is 3. Negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. Negative 2 times 1 is negative 2, and negative 2 and 1 gives you negative 1. And then negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. Negative 4 plus 1 is negative 3. Okay? So once you get that table, what you're going to need to do is now you're going to need to draw a graph. Okay? So while you guys are doing that, I'm going to update down here. So what we did was we wrote them as ordered pairs. Or you can write them as ordered pairs. Because that might be easier for you to graph. So seeing them this way might not be as easy as actually writing them negative 2, 5, negative 1, 3, 0, 1, 1, negative 1, and 2, negative 3. That way you know that when you're graphing, all you have to do is plot those points. So that last step would be graph. Okay? So then I'm going to pause my video. I'm going to draw a graph. I would probably suggest that you do the same so that way you're not behind. So I drew my graph. Hopefully you did the same. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot these coordinates. So these x's and y's gave me my ordered pairs. So now I'm going to put them on my graph. Okay, so I have negative 2, 5, negative 1, 3, 0, 1, 1, negative 1, and 2, negative 3. Okay? And then I'm going to draw my line through. And right there, I graphed my equation. Now, I just want to give you guys a reminder. So, y equals negative 2x plus 1. Okay? So, the first thing I want to talk about is your y-intercept. If you guys remember, that second number is your y-intercept. That means when x is 0. So, if you plug in 0 for x, negative 2 times 0 is 0. 0 plus 1 is 1. So y equals 1. That means when x is 0, y is 1. We learned that from our table, but if you remember, that's where you can start when you're graphing. So if you just go straight from the equation, that's where you can start. Okay? And then hopefully you guys also remember that that number in front of the x is your slope, and that's your rise over your run. So if it's a whole number, you just put whole numbers over 1, so that means it's negative 2 over 1. So that means you would rise or go down 1, 2 over 1. So you guys can see if you do that from each one, down 2 over 1, you're going to find that all of them have that same slope of negative 2. Okay? So that's just a really good reminder about graphing slope. So make sure you get that all written down. If you need to pause it, you can pause it, whatever you need to do. And then I'm going to give you guys a couple of little reminders over here. So if you want to pause it and write that down, and then you can catch up afterwards, that's fine. So a couple little tricks to remember. If you have a horizontal line, your equation is always going to look like y equals b. Because what that means is all of them have the same exact y. So you would have a graph that looks like this, and say that's at 2, right? So if you have a horizontal line, that means that every single y that you have is at 2, no matter where you go on that line. So this equation would be y equals 2. Okay? So that's a trick about horizontal lines. If you guys want to just put that on your paper, if you need to flip the page, however you want to take it, I like to kind of doodle in my notes. So that's kind of what I do. Okay? Then I'm going to go down here. Like I said, I'm a doodler. And then we're also going to talk about vertical lines. So remember, if you have a vertical slope, that's always going to look like x equals a. And what that means is every single one of them has the same x. So if I draw a graph for this one, oops, that wasn't very straight. That's okay. Okay, so there's my graph. And if I have this guy over here, if you look at it, that means every single x would be on negative 1, no matter what the y is. So then your equation for this would be x equals negative 1. Okay? So these are a couple reminders about some of your slopes and your graphs, because you might see those and you might realize that you already know the equation and you don't need to make a table because you know how to do it. Okay? So make sure you guys get all that. Make sure you freeze it if you need to. This is going to help you a lot, so however much you work on your notes, it's going to help you when you're trying to study. Alright, so now I want you to try these 4 on your own. So what I want you to do is I want you to graph these. If you need to make a table first, and then you can graph them that way. If you think you can just graph them from the slope-intercept form, you can do that as well. So pause your video, make sure that you actually make an effort and you try them on your own, and then when you're done, come back and we'll go through them together. Okay, so let's talk about this first one. First of all, I really hope that you didn't make a table. I hope you remember those 2 hints we just talked about, that when you have something that looks like y equals b, what that means is it's a horizontal line, because that means that every single y is the same. So if y equals negative 3, that means no matter what x you have, all of your y's are going to be negative 3. So it's 0, negative 3, 2, negative 3. And then you just draw your line through. And you have graphed y equals negative 3. Okay, so make sure you have that one down, and then we'll move on to the next one. All right, now let's look at number 2. Same thing, I hope you didn't make a table, and I hope you remember that when you have something that looks like x equals a, it's a vertical line, because that means that every single x value is 2. So that means no matter where you go, all of your x's would be on 2. And then you would draw your line. And that is what x equals 2 is. Okay? So make sure you have that one written down, and then we'll move on to number 3. So for number 3, you have y equals 3x. For this one, I would make a table. Now, remember, when you make a table, you can use whatever x values you want. So I always pick ones that work pretty easily. So I'm going to go with -1, 0, 1, and 2. Okay? So then what you need to do is you just need to plug in those x values in this equation. So all of them are 3 times x. So that means you would have 3 times -1, three times 0, 3 times 1, and 3 times 2. Okay? So all I did was plug in the x's where it says x. Now I picked these because they all lie on the number line. You guys can see them. I have -1, 0, 1, and 2. You could pick any x value that goes on there. It doesn't matter. So 3 times -1, -3, 3 times 0 is 0, 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 2 is 6. Now remember, if you want to write these as ordered pairs, you can, but these are just telling you where to go. So if this makes sense, that's fine. If not, go ahead and write them. -1, -3, 0, 0, 1, 3, 2, 6. So all you're doing is graphing these. So -1, -3, 0, 0, 1, 3, 2, 6. And there you go. Now also remember, if you want to just try to do it from the equation. If you look at this equation, there's no y-intercept. So that means if you plug in 0 for x, y equals 3 times 0. 3 times 0 is 0, so that means x would be 0, y would be 0. That's where you would start. So we started at 0, 0, and our slope is 3. And remember, if you have a whole number, you can just write it over 1. So that means from each point, we should go up 3 over 1. And that's our slope. And it'll work every time you do it. Up, 1, 2, 3, over 1. Okay? So again, pause it if you need to. If you need a little extra time, go ahead. And then our last one. Make sure you guys are ready. So I would pause it and then come back, set up a table, set up a graph if you haven't already. Okay, so this last one I want to talk to you about the x values I picked and y. If you notice, whatever you put in for x, it has to be multiplied by 1/2. And if you remember, multiplying by 1/2 is just like dividing by 2. So I'm going to pick some really easy numbers. I'm going to go with -2, 0, and 2. Because all of those are divisible by 2. So then what you're going to do is you're going to set up your problem just like you did the last time. And you're going to take whatever x is and plug it in for x. So I'm going to take -1/2 times -2 over 1, because all numbers go over 1, plus 2. And I'm going to do that for each of these. So I'm going to plug in whatever my x value is. My whole numbers can go over 1 to make it easier. And then I'm going to finish writing my problem. Okay? So now I'm going to solve these. So right here, you get -2 divided by -2, that's 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. Anything times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. Positive divided by negative is negative. Plus positive, going to give us 1. Okay? And then we're going to graph them. So we have -2, 3, 0, 2, 2, 1. And that's it.